Speaker will sit with that,
Speaker will speak from here.
that one.
अच्छा बाकी पार्टिसिपेंट कोई होगा क्या लोग होंगे साथ
Good afternoon. I welcome you all to Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science, the oldest academic institution of the country and also of Asia, and youngest deemed to be university as recognized by the Ministry of Higher Education. Today we have assembled here to listen to an important endowment lecture which has been created in honor of a former faculty member of the Institute, Professor T.K. Rayadostidar. And we are very grateful to have Professor Saurabh Pal, an eminent scientist and a former alumnus of this institution, to be present here with us, who has kindly consented to deliver this endowment lecture. Before I formally introduce Professor Pal, I introduce Professor T.K. Rayadostidar, who was born in Sylhet, presently in Bangladesh, in the year 1942. He had a bright academic career and was awarded master's degree in physics from Calcutta University with distinction. And he joined IACS as junior research fellow in 1964, was awarded PhD degree for completing experimental study on transport properties of matter under the supervision of Professor A.K. Borua in 1968. He did his postdoctoral research at Freiburg, Germany on molecular beam experiment with Professor Slyer. He joined IACS as lecturer in 1974 and developed ion beam experimental lab from scratch, which was the first attempt in the eastern region of this country to study ion neutral collision processes in the ion beam static gas configuration. Side by side, he developed a school in theoretical physics which achieved excellence in the field of collision theory and optical physics. He visited University of Southern California, LA during 81 and 82 and was invited to several conferences internationally and nationally on atomic, molecular, and optical physics. His students are well established on different academic institutions in India and abroad. Professor T.K. Rayadostidar was an internationally recognized scientist for his contribution in the field of both experimental and theoretical atomic, molecular, and optical physics, was a fellow of West Bengal Academy of Science and Technology. He had multifaceted personality and was respected by one and all for his wisdom and positive thinking. In honor of Professor Rayadostidar, IACS has instituted this endowment lecture as a part of Golden Jubilee celebration of Department of Science and Technology, which is the administrative department of this organization. We are particularly delighted to have Professor Saurabh Pal. I would introduce him formally, although he does not require any introduction, particularly in this part of the world. He is an Indian theoretical chemist, professor of chemistry in IIT Bombay, and also the director of IISCR Kolkata. He was formerly director of CSIR National Chemical Laboratory Pune and adjunct professor at the ISAR Pune. Professor Pal is known for his widespread contribution in quantum chemistry, especially in the field of coupled cluster-based methods, made major scientific accomplishments with the rigorous development of expectation value as well as extended couple cluster functional development of response properties to multi-reference couple cluster theory, the effect of electron correlation and role of exchange effects on the low energy electron molecule scattering, introduction of complex scaling and complex absorbing potential in MRCC theory to calculate electron atom and electron molecule resonances accurately. He has developed a non-iterative approximation to coupled perturbed Kohn-Sham density functional theoretic equations for the calculation of nonlinear properties, which is supplemented in the developer's version of Daemon code. Dr. Pal has also made significant contribution in the area of reactivity descriptors, highlighting conditions of validity of the principles of maximum hardness, deriving qualitative relation of hardness with polarizability, establishing Hirschfeld population in calculation condensed Fukui functions, and developing local Hartsoft acid-base principle for molecular recognition. Professor Pal had his early education from IIT Kanpur, where from he obtained his master's degree and doctorate from Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science under the supervision of Professor Devashish Mukherjee. Subsequently, he spent a year of postdoctoral research at the University of Florida under the tutelage of Professor Rodney Bartlett in 1986. He is recipient of numerous awards and honors. I will mention only a few because of lack of time. He is recipient of Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize in Chemical Sciences. He is a J.C. Bose National Fellow. He is a Chemical Research Society of India Silver Medallion. He actually was also former president of Chemical Research Society of India. Elected as a fellow of Indian National Science Academy, Indian Academy of Sciences, National Academy of Sciences. Received Jagdish Shankar Memorial Lecture of INSA, and recipient of Bimala Achurn Law Memorial Lecture Award of ICS, Daiichi Karkaria Endowment Lecture of UICT, and recipient of Maharashtra Academy of Sciences Fellowship, and many other recognitions. He has been member of the editorial boards of numerous journals and societies, and it is my great pleasure to invite Professor Pal to deliver his talk.
Thank you, Professor Bhattacharya, for an introduction and also inviting me to deliver this Professor T.K. Raidostidar Memorial Lecture. I know Professor Raidostidar at the time when I was doing PhD. I remember we used to have a lot of discussion, and in those days, he was also a very good friend of Devasisda. I must recall that. So we used to have a lot of interactions, and being an atomic and molecular physicist and we pursuing quantum chemistry, as you will quickly see, there's a lot of similarity between the atomic and molecular physics and quantum chemistry. So many of the theories that we're developing for atoms and molecules are directly relevant to the atomic and molecular physics, particularly the area of spectroscopy in which Professor Raidostidar specializes. He was one of a rare person who was doing both experiment and theory with great aplomb, and I must say that that's a very rare trait in our country. So I think with that, I would say that he has done a seminal contribution from ISCS, and I'm very honored to be invited to deliver this lecture. So with this, I think I will now share my presentation.
Yes.
And as you can see from the title, I am giving more a reflective lecture
than a lecture on a very specific topic. And the reflective lecture is because of various events, various things that we are now witness. I wanted to say, yeah, let me see that. Yeah, it's okay. No, it's down. Full screen. It should be down. So it's a reflective lecture, and the title is Computational Chemistry, Where We Are and Where Do We Go? So I think that is the title that I have given. I must say that I am currently RISER Kolkata, but much of my time, in fact, most of my time in my career, I spent in National Chemical Laboratory, Pune. I spent 33 years. So when I went to NCL, I must say again, as a reflection, that there was hardly any theoretical chemistry. NCL was a laboratory under the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. So there was much of an industrial research focus and not the fundamental research of the type that I set out to do. So I must acknowledge the leadership of NCL that despite initial doubts, they continued to support my research. And eventually it was a pleasant experience when I myself became director of this laboratory. I, of course, went from NCL to IIT Bombay in 2015, June, 1st of June. And I was there for 2 years and a few months after which I actually came to IISER Kolkata as a director. I have just retired from from IIT Bombay, just like NCL. So I said I'm a former professor of IIT Bombay. 31st of May last year, I have retired, having attained 65 years of age. So I think at this time, having seen a lot of growth of theoretical chemistry and computational chemistry, I thought I'll give a more reflective talk rather than going to a specific part of my work. So with that and my tributes to Professor T.K. Raidasidar for the wonderful work. It's not working. Okay. So I will begin my talk. This is, of course, a very quick slides on the three cities on which I have lived. And many of the work, my own research that I will speak, started from Pune. They have moved to Mumbai and eventually now to Kolkata. This is, of course, Professor Raidasidar. For all of you would recollect, this is a photograph at his young age. And I still vividly remember him. And we used to meet him very regularly at ICS corridors, and a great person in spectroscopy, as I said, and in atomic and molecular physics. So I think that's the reason I'm going to talk of spectroscopy, of how quantum chemistry or computational chemistry has become a great tool, but also tell how computational chemistry has expanded beyond simply looking at atoms and molecules to much larger length scales of biology and materials. And eventually, last couple of slides, I will try to show the outlook. Where do we go? What are the challenges? So just for record, I must say that IISER Kolkata, those who do not know, is an institute of national importance. It is set up to have an integrated research with education. And today, a lot of people are talking of education and research integration. It has its undergraduate science program, which is basically Bachelor of Science, Master of Science, DSMS program, which is the flagship program of ours, but we also have normal PhD as well as integrated PhD. The focus, as I said, is interdisciplinary research and education. And in decade, IISERs have now become brand of science education in this country. As many of you know, there are 7 IISERs, but Kolkata was the first of the 2 set up in 2006. And I'm very fortunate to be associated with the other one, which was set up in 2006. That's in IISER Pune. In fact, I was in the implementation committee of the setting up of IISER Pune, which was set up in 2004 by the government. So, and since then, I have also been associated with IISER Pune
And actually, I'm officially still adjunct professor of IISER Pune. I see that in the website, they still keep my name, although I have not been able to teach in IISER Pune for last few years. I just wanted to tell that when we're discussing our theoretical chemistry, this slide is not out of context, because when we talk of science, there are two very important aspects of science. One is a quest for fundamental understanding, which is basically high science. Another is a consideration of use, which is basically the application. So I can actually say one axis is invention, the y-axis, and the x-axis is innovation, when you actually convert the knowledge to the market. And a lot of people are talking of innovation today, looking at incubation centers. The reason it is not out of place is that the computational chemistry is beginning to play a role. And that is what I want to say. So to go to the use-inspired basic research quadrant, which is called the Pasteur quadrant, which is high science and high innovation, the theoretical chemistry or computational chemistry is today playing a very, very important role. But it was not easy. In fact, many people went up to the pure basic research in the Bohr quadrant. They could not move in the x-axis. And this has been very nicely put up in this particular slide by C.P. Snow as late as 1964, when he says we prided ourselves that the science that we were doing could not, in any conceivable circumstances, have any practical use. Just look at the sentence. We prided ourselves that it cannot have any use. More firmly one could make that claim, the more superior one felt. And this is the problem, that there are very good people who are very good in basic science. They think they are very good because their science cannot be used practically in applications. And this has been the problem of innovation, which is very nicely captured by C.P. Snow. Much of it is actually mindset. And I dare say today computational chemistry and biology, along with computational physics, is beginning to say that it is possible to do high science and make yourself applications oriented. Two very important quotes I will again show are around the same time. One, 1828, about 200 years back, by Andre Cotelle, which says the more progress physical sciences make, the more they tend to enter the domain of mathematics, which is a kind of center to which they all converge. We may even judge the degree of perfection to which a science has arrived by the facility with which it may be submitted to calculation. Imagine this was said 200 years back, that the importance of theory, the importance of mathematics in understanding. But look at this quote. 2 years after by Comte, 1830, it says that every attempt to employ mathematical methods in the study of chemical questions must be considered profoundly irrational and contrary to the spirit of chemistry. If mathematical analysis should ever hold a prominent place in chemistry, which is an aberration, which is happily almost impossible, it would occasion a rapid and widespread degeneration of that science. So you can imagine the chemists, the way the chemist is to view theory is completely different from the earlier quote. And in fact, this has been a problem where many synthetic chemists still used to believe that computational chemistry is no good. I will come to that how nicely synthetic chemists are today using computational chemistry. But I must say that the theoretical chemistry, as we know today, is really start from the modern quantum mechanics. But there was a theory before the modern theory, which was done by G.N. Lewis. Many of you know G.N. Lewis, who actually wrote a very famous paper on the atom and the molecule. That should have been 1916. G.N. Lewis, 1875 to 1946. And his very famous book also, The Valence and the Structure of Atoms and Molecules. And he looked at the bonding in terms of octet rule. And all of you know that he is very successful. Of course, this is a completely different slide showing the agony, the puzzle that Lewis never got a Nobel Prize, although he did so many work. And many people think that had he lived longer, he would have probably got the 1954 Nobel Prize with Linus Pauling, but that is still debatable. But the important thing is that the Lewis theory, he recognized the valence electrons as a fundamental to bonding, and he looked at ionic bond, covalent bond, without any quantum mechanics. And the very famous paper that Lewis wrote in JACS 1916, very simply titled The Atom and the Molecule. And he, of course, talked of chemical bond. Already he talked of chemical bond before quantum mechanics came. This is some of the Lewis structure from his memoir in 1902, his own handwriting. I could somehow get from the history. it was amazing to see that the chemical bond, why two atoms form a molecule was there even before quantum mechanics actually came. In fact, people talked of bonds as different types of bond: ionic, covalent, metallic, metal to non-metal, non-metal to non-metal, metal to metal, the metallic bonds, and different characteristics of electrons transferred, electrons shared, electrons pulled were there long back. The quantum mechanics simply attested to it, how quantitatively they can be calculated, and of course went beyond a very simple qualitative picture. So what is computational chemistry? In short, it is the application of the computational methods and algorithms in chemistry in a very short way. Summary. What are the methods in algorithm? Of course, one is quantum mechanics today. One is quantum mechanics. The second is molecular mechanics, which is often called classical atomistic simulation, or even the coarse grain, which is basically simulation consisting of bits, which is bits of atoms. So for a very large length scale, you would like to use molecular mechanics, or even larger length scale, you would like to use coarse graining. For small atoms and molecules, how small is of course, we can debate, and I'm going to come to that. You can still use quantum mechanics. Then there are empirical methods, which are basically like quantitative structure activity relationship. I have to mention this in the entire gamut of quantum computational chemistry. Many people who are doing drug discovery use these empirical or statistical theories in clinical as well as medicinal chemistry. They are mostly empirical. Of course, they do not have a first principle base compared to the others. The point that I talked about is that for innovation or even invention, you require a solution. And the solution comes from the three arms of theory, experiment, and computation. So we are here talking of theory and computation, which are very closely related. And what is required is not just computation or just theory or just experiment. What is required today is a solution. So how do you solve the problem? That is more important than just a skill base. So in that sense, the science is changing today. And the chemistry is also changing in that sense. But invariably, we discuss what is the difference between theory and computational chemistry. I think the discussion is very simple. The theoretical chemistry is defined as a mathematical description of physics involved in chemistry, whereas computational chemistry is usually used when a mathematical method is sufficiently well developed, and it can be automated for implementation. In theoretical chemistry, chemists, physicists, and mathematicians develop. The computational chemistry simply apply the existing programs and methodologies to specific chemical questions. So this is a very simple way to define the difference between these two. But as we know, that these differences are really more of semantic, and in many senses, these differences often need not exist. As I said, modern theoretical chemistry started with quantum mechanics, and that was really after 1 year after the Schrodinger's famous paper of quantum mechanics in 1926. That was by Heitler in London, the valence bond theory in 1927, the hydrogen molecule bonding. I quote a very famous quotation by one Professor Jack Simons of the University of Utah. He said, quote, "I often am asked by neighbors, people I meet on a sky lift, or by colleagues in the non-science department, what is a theoretical chemist? Are you not a real chemist?" This is what Jack Simons asked. Now, I quote from Wikipedia, what is a theory? I already told you what is a theory. Wikipedia says that in science, a theory is a mathematical or logical explanation or a testable model of the manner of interaction of a set of natural phenomena capable of predicting future occurrences or observations of the same kind, and capable of being tested through experiment or otherwise falsified through empirical observation. It's very interesting to see. This is actually the definition for Wikipedia of a theory. And so the question that is a theoretical chemist a chemist or a theorist, or both? So of course, in chemistry, we connect laboratory observations to the behavior of the underlying atoms and molecules through the theory. So that is where the theoretical chemists play a very important role to create these means for connecting laboratory observations to molecular behavior. I'll give some simple example. I'll skip this slide. I mean, many of you know this. So how do you connect theory to laboratory data? For example, you want to measure bond, you want to know bond length, bond angle. many of these vibrational frequency, potential surface, you talk of it, molecular orbitals, transition states, they are actually all unreal. Because you don't do experiment to directly find them. So that's why I'm calling it unreal. They are simply constructs of various theories used to relate laboratory measurements to atomic, molecular, or material level behavior. Thus, the experiment data are real, but the quantities obtained using the theory to interpret or fit the data are often, I can say, less real, but they are very, very important. So, and that is where the theory comes in. So one example, or 2-3 examples, bond distance fitted to spectral data like rotational, resolved, NMR, X-ray. You have the raw data, from there you find out the bond distance through some equations. Vibrational spacing, this is fitted to obtain dissociation energy. You don't get dissociation energy directly from vibrational spacing. You can get activation energy and to the properties of reacting molecule at the transition state through a very famous theory called the transition state theory, which is again just a theory. You don't directly look at those properties experimentally. Very famous thing that organic chemists very often use, charge of an atom in a molecule. That is completely arbitrary theoretician's concept. You don't actually verify the charge of an atom. You fit it to some observable data. So I think it's very important to understand what we observe in experiment and what is theory. How do you fit it? Sorry. I should very quickly go through the next 2 or 3 slides. When the theoretical chemistry started, even before the age of computers, which I roughly say 1940s, Heitler and London, I already told, the first paper of quantum chemistry, Born-Oppenheimer's molecule, one of the landmark paper by Born and Oppenheimer in 1927, Huckel's early numbers, Mulliken's molecular orbitals, one of many. It talked of molecular orbitals and dipole moments. In valence bond, I talked of Pauling and Slater's war with Mulliken. Very, very famous thing, Linus Pauling in JACS 1931, the nature of the chemical bond, application of the results obtained from the quantum mechanics and from a theory of paramagnetic susceptibility to the structure of molecules, the same thing that I was talking, how to relate. Hybridization. Is it yet another kind of orbital? This is again, hybridization is a theoretician's concept to explain certain experimental, like shapes of molecules. Coulson and Moffitt started with this, Bond's theory of liquid, Eyring's transition state theory. Of course, Pauling eventually made nature of chemical bonds. So many of these things happened even before the computers came. And after the computers came, people started looking at simulation, actual coding in a very big way. So one of the first molecular simulation in a computer was done by Metropolis and Rosenbluth in et al. In 1953 in Journal of Chemical Physics, equation of state calculations by fast computing machines. That was the title of the paper. Ruth Hahn, and I don't want to talk about Ruth Hahn. I don't know why I said, what about poor Hall? Those who know this story will know of the methylene radical, whether it is bent or linear. They will know what was the story of Hall and how that was solved by Henry Schaeffer, eventually saying that the methylene is bent. The molecular orbital theory of chemical valence, the pi era, Dewar and Langwitt-Higgins, very, very important work for which the many chemical theories were solved. Carr and Parinello, of course, in the very famous physical review letters, Karplus, et al. In Nature on dynamics of folded protein. Again, I want to remind how theories were developing in different areas. Chandler's transition state theories. It's again very, very important today. And then, of course, the coupled cluster theory in quantum chemistry. Professor Bhattacharya mentioned that I talked about it. I'm not going to speak much on coupled cluster today, but I must say that while this was all happening, coupled cluster became the gold standard of quantum chemistry. Gold standard essentially, meaning that's the standard, which is the benchmark standard. Hoffman and Woodward, who got Nobel Prize, the conservation of orbital symmetry, again, very qualitative theory. Poulet's gradients, very different kind of things happening at different times, 68, 69, very, very quantitative gradients Poulet calculated. Intrinsic reaction coordinate of Kenichi Fukui, again, Fukui got Nobel Prize later, and a very, very famous work of Warcel, which got Nobel Prize in 2013 on QMMN, where you graph 2 different length scales together. So the point that I'm trying to say that while all these laws were being done, and many of them are qualitative, approximate theories. A very famous statement of Dirac that many of you know, that the underlying physical laws necessary for the mathematical theory of a large part of physics and the whole of chemistry are thus completely known, and the difficulty is only that the exact application of these laws leads to equations much too complicated to be soluble. Otherwise, you actually can solve everything by quantum mechanics, but it is simply because the systems are so large, computers are not so large, that you have to resort to various approximations that we are talking about. But today, the scenario is chemistry is all pervasive. What is not chemistry? From material science, in physics, human disease, drug design, everything is chemistry. And in the same manner, I can say what cannot computational chemistry deal with? And that is where my title goes, where we are today. Today, we are at a stage where we can say that we can handle small molecules to DNA, protein, 3D crystal surfaces, from species in vacuum to those in solvent, structure, properties, spectroscopy. In fact, I dare say, and this is a very provocative statement, all experiments done in labs can be done in silico, which means all those experiments can be done in the computer. We are limited only by supercomputers, not big or fast enough. When will such computers come, where I can do everything in computer? I do not know. That answer I do not know, but it could be 30 years, it could be 40 years, it could be even as less as 20 years. But the central theme of computational chemistry has been a structure, dynamics, and reactivity. Look at structure, look at the dynamics of a system and reactivity. And it is the same in the molecular biology, where you put sequencing and evaluation at the top and the bottom. But otherwise, it's the structure, dynamics, and function. So many people who are doing molecular biology and computational chemistry, they have same role. And that is the reason the multidisciplinary merging is taking place. The computational chemistry and computational biology are merging together. So I already showed this slide. So there are lots of properties. I will not go through these properties, which are calculated by molecular orbital, like energy, dipole moment, energy level, electron distribution, vibrational frequency, reaction pathways, energies, reaction intermediates, transition structure, orbital interaction, shapes of molecules, I told, including those of large biomolecules, prediction of molecular properties. It's important to know how big today we can deal. And this slide is important. Using ab initio method, which is basically the solution of the Schrodinger equation, one can typically, very highly correlated method, you can typically do 100 atoms. In a very big computer, you can do couple cluster for 100 atoms. Couple cluster is, of course, the benchmark of the ab initio methods. DFT, you can do 1,000 atoms. So you can see why density functional theory among the quantum mechanical methods are becoming very popular, because it is based only on electron density and it does not require you to calculate the wave function. Semi-empirical methods, which are basically parameterized, you can go to 10,000 atoms. And if you do simply classical simulation, you can do 100,000 atoms. That essentially means for proteins, etc., we are forced to do classical simulations because their number of atoms are the orders of few thousands, few tens of thousands. And of course, you can do coarse graining. Even on top of that, like membrane, polymer, etc. Coarse graining is today very, very new, very important subject. However, within the ab initio methods, I mean, this is a very qualitative slide to show size and accuracy. As the size increases, the accuracy decreases. So the couple cluster, very high accuracy, and the size is very low. And then non-local density functional theory and perturbation theory, local density functional theory is almost similar to Hartree-Fock. Then semi-empirical theory you can do for large system. So what is important that within density functional theory, there are two major branch, local and non-local. And local is basically starting from the LDA, which physicists use very often. And the non-locals are, of course, not only generalized gradient, but also hybrid functionals and so on. And in the same way, you can start from Hartree-Fock to perturbation to couple cluster, and particularly the multi-reference couple cluster, which are absolutely the state-of-the-art methods. We can calculate, as I said, equilibrium bond length by doing theory. And this is the slide that I wanted to show where the computational chemistry is today. Today, we can do by different simulations, methods from molecules to materials. So you can do electronic structure molecules, DFT, ab initio, quantum Monte Carlo. You can do atomistic simulation, and then you can do mesoscale simulation for much larger system. And eventually they move to engineering simulation, which is basically macro simulation of CFD, finite element, Brownian dynamics, cellular automata, and so on. What is theoretically very challenging is to connect these methods from a bottom-up approach. So we are able to connect the atomistic simulation with quantum mechanics. So basically hydrogen molecule, the force field of hydrogen molecule can be obtained from a very accurate calculation of quantum mechanics. Similarly, coarse graining, which is mesoscale simulation, can be obtained from the atomistic simulation. And this part is not very clear, but still people are doing it. Of course, we would like to know, can I go from mesoscale to engineering simulation? And that is a big challenge, theoretical challenge. It may not require quantum chemists, it may require some theoretical physicist or chemist to work on this. What is interesting is that the large length scale engineering simulation was developed much earlier. And then came the quantum mechanics. And then what we started is to put together the intermediate region. And this is actually the theme of a multi-scale simulation. How do you predict accurately, as accurately as possible, a larger length scale calculation from a seemingly more accurate, smaller length scale calculation? And that is basically the theme of the multi-scale simulation. But today it is possible because so many methods are available that computational chemistry is a very potent tool for hard and soft materials. One can do this for the nanomaterials. In fact, very famous statements of Schrödinger. We would never experiment with one electron, atom, or molecule in 1952. By the time it changed in 1960, when Feynman said there are no physical limitations to arranging atoms the way we want. By 1980, STM came, and that radically started the area of nanomaterials. Nanomaterials were started by STM. I would say the scanning tunneling microscope, AFM, discovery of that. The AFM came there, and all of you know, Binning and Roerer got Nobel Prize in 1986. And of course, then there was also the nanotubes, which came in the mid-90s, which also got Nobel Prize. I think these are very, very important work. Some of these we are able to capture in our group. And as you can see, that we essentially started from electronic structure of molecules, developing the bound state methods for not only energy and properties, but also to situations which are apparently non-bound, like resonance and decay, by using complex absorbing potential. We developed various many-body methods for molecular properties and non-iterative approximation to DFT for large systems. We also did a little bit of density functional development, and also developing the descriptors to address reactivity of the molecules. And then towards last few, about 10-15 years, we have also been applying density functional theory to materials, because in materials, the systems are so large that it is almost impossible to develop the ab initio theories. So a lot has happened. So some of the early work, I must say here, because it started from IACS. So that is one of the reasons that I'm trying to make it very reflective. And that time I had no hint that I could go to materials. Computation for materials, we started looking at the average value couple cluster, and as you can see, these are all started from IACS. Many of these went to NCL with my own group. And on the response properties, then we did from National Chemical Lab extended couple cluster, which actually is a slightly more complicated than the normal couple cluster because it has a de-excitation amplitudes. Of course, it was not Hermitian, but you could truncate, and it was fully size extensive. So that was the advantage. So there are a lot of advantages of the average, the extended couple cluster over the average value thing that we are developing at IACS. In fact, that was one of my PhD thing. But then later I realized that it is much easier to do extended couple cluster when I started work at NCL. The multi-reference couple cluster, which again had a origin at IACS because Debasys did seminal work in that. We started developing the codes for the molecules, very early codes and ionization potential, electron affinity, excitation energy. In 1987, this is one of the first papers for molecules. Uzi Caldor had also done a little bit of work, but many of them were for the atoms. But we started working on the molecules, and then, of course, we did very important work on extended this molecular, this multi-reference method to response properties. So how does it analytically behave in the presence of electric or magnetic field? So how do you get response? That's the idea of the response properties. So we moved there, and lots of applications for electric and magnetic properties we did. And we also compared with a very similar methods, which is equation of motion coupled cluster. A lot of people work. And I think in ISCS currently, Debashree Ghosh, who is a faculty, has a lot of experience and worked on the UMCC approaches. They're very, very closely connected with the multi-reference methods. We looked at low scaling many-body coupled cluster approximation. In a very recent times, we looked at how do you make the equation of motion coupled cluster, singles, doubles, to an n to the power 5 scaling from n to the power 6 scaling. It was very interesting. And we could show that it is possible by only looking at the ground state as a perturbative approximation and then doing the equation of motion. And the error that took place were not much. So very recent application, not very recent now, 5 years back, water cluster electron detachment, we had done that time as an application to this. Then a very significant work that we did starting around 2005 was to look at the resonance and decay problem. And of course, many physicists have worked on the resonance and decay problem, but they never used typically the bound state methods. So we looked at, can the bound state methods be used? Of course, all of you know, as a physicist, all of you would know what is the problem in resonance and decay, because they are actually unbound states. They are not square integrable. So you cannot use the bound state problem a priori. But then there was a work by Nimrod Moisiev, which showed that if you use complex absorbing potential to the Hamiltonian, then you can make it bound. And then the real part of the electron affinity is the resonance energy of electron molecule, and the imaginary part could be the decay. So basically, we use that idea to use it in the coupled cluster. So using CAP, we did CAP coupled cluster, multi-reference coupled cluster, and we could generate set resonance, Auger decay, interatomic Coulombic decay. In fact, interatomic Coulombic decay is a very interesting experiment, which is an offshot of the Auger decay, in the sense that in Auger, the double holes are generated on the same system. Here, they get distributed in different fragments. So this interatomic, the ICD was actually done, and an experiment was done in ICD. Very recently, we have also looked at a resonance of an excited state. That is very difficult to do. In fact, this recent paper in molecular physics in 2020, we looked at SO2 minus excited state. So lots of application. I'm not again going into the details because that is something that is not the idea of this particular talk, but a very recent review that we looked at the resonance and decay problem. For those who are interested in Journal of Physical Chemistry, it's an invited feature article, which is just published, I think, in December issue of 2020. Very recently, we also did relativistic coupled cluster method, and that's also a very recent work. And with the help of 2 or 3 very good students, we could do take into account the subtle spin orbit coupling, again in the coupled cluster, and relativistic effects, new theoretical developments on the ionization, electron affinity, double ionization, PT-odd interaction, electric magnetic properties. We actually identified mercury hydride. A very important work was to identify mercury hydride with a high dipole moment. That was only possible because of this high level theory. Radium fluoride as a candidate for parity time reversal violating interaction. Again, each of them I could give a lecture separately, but I just wanted to tell what are the powers of the computational chemistry today. So we could do a lot of interesting work on this. So basically, to summarize this recent work, we are working on the 2 aspects of highly correlated electronic structure methods. And I must here mention what we mean by highly correlated. It is to get the right results for the right reasons. So very often by using theories, you can get right results, but they come because of the wrong reasons, because of some error cancellation. To get the right results for the right reasons is an idea that the theoretical chemist must pursue. So on the left side, I talked about very recent works on relativistic coupled cluster. And on the right side, I talked of the bound state coupled cluster for resonance and decay. So I must say in last 10 years, these are the 2 important areas of work that I am pursuing in the electronic structure. So I just thought I will leave that slide, and which I already talked about. Before I move to what I have been doing in last almost 15 years on application of computational chemistry to functional clusters and materials. And in particular, we started with an aromaticity and anti-aromaticity in mixed metal cluster. This is very interesting because people thought that aromaticity is something that only happens in organic molecules. But we showed that even in mixed metal cluster, they behave aromatic or anti-aromatic ways. So either very stable or reactive. And one could do an electron counting, but here there was an effect that was more important than in the organic chemistry, that is the sigma aromaticity. Organic chemists always talk of aromaticity as a pi aromaticity, but we also showed there is something called sigma aromaticity here. We looked at gold clusters, a lot of work on gold cluster. I will show highlights of gold clusters as a catalysis. We looked at aluminum cluster, which are also very reactive, so they can do catalysis. And then, one of the environmentally important problem of N2O reduction by carbon monoxide in iron beta zeolite. It's a very environmental problem. We showed that how inside the iron beta zeolite catalysis, N2O can be more effortlessly reduced by carbon monoxide. And finally, the hydrogen storage, and that's a very, very important problem if you want to make hydrogen as an energy for renewable sources. A few interesting results. Those who have done a lot of work, I just want to tell a few interesting results, particularly on gold and aluminum cluster, as well as silver. So one is a hydrogen atom chemisorb gold and silver cluster is a very good activating agent. So we showed that can break oxygen or at least activate oxygen and do a very good CO oxidation reaction. So this is basically gold, small gold and silver cluster. I will show a figure very soon, which are chemisorbed by hydrogen atoms. And believe me, these experiments are done in gas phase. One can prepare today hydrogen atom chemisorb gold and silver clusters. So they can break. So in situ, if somebody can use them, they can actually break the bonds. Oxidative addition of a carbon iodine bond, an aluminum nanocluster. All of us know how important is the oxidative addition reaction of a carbon halide bond in CC bond formation. Aluminum cluster, we published that in the nanoscale. Endohedrali doped gold nano cages for efficient oxygen activation and CO oxidation. I'll show that also. Then radical attached aluminum cluster stabilization. Aluminum cluster, and this is something I'm very excited, the last part. Aluminum cluster on boron nitride doped graphene support. So basically you have a graphene and then you put BN dope, boron nitride as a molecule, not B, M. Boron nitride molecule, and then you put aluminum cluster. If you don't put aluminum cluster, it doesn't help, but aluminum cluster is stabilized. Because all of you know aluminum cluster is extremely reactive. It gets stabilized if you have BN doped graphene. Theoretically, it has been a very good thing. I hope experimentally one could synthesize and actually look at this as a catalyst, and we have done even for dinitrogen activation. Very recently, we are doing catalyst designing, and in fact, in catalyst designing, I must say there are a lot of things which are there: reaction, selection of metal, pre-catalyst, co-catalyst, additive, and so on. So we are particularly looking at organometallics as a catalyst, and I'm amazed that computational chemistry, using of course DFT, can give such good insights to a design of a catalyst. So I would say de novo design of catalyst is a very powerful thing that the computational chemistry can do today. We are looking at homogeneous catalysis. For example, I have a particular project on CO2 activation to formic acid through the homogeneous catalysis. So homogeneous catalysis using metals which are less precious. So that is very important, which are cheaper metals for activating CO2. All of you know CO2 activation is a very, very important job today, not only for fuels, but also for environment, cleaning the environment. So we are looking at this as a very important part. Again, many of the homogeneous catalysis we are developing, I will not be able to tell today because they are not yet published. Some of them are in the stage of patenting, but many of these catalysts are extremely important today, will be very, very important if I can get one. And again, these are only done by computation. And side by side, of course, I have my collaborators who are doing experiments. So this is basically under an imprint project. Many of you know imprint project that the government has started. So we have got a big imprint project where we also have an industry partner called Gas Authority of India Limited, GAIL, who are actually will take our process for the downstream application. So I think it will be very interesting if it can be done. And this will be one of the few projects which I will say from concept to market. So we start with the concept of theory, design a catalyst, do a pilot plant processing, and go eventually to the market through the industry. So that's the big ambition that today we have. And obviously computational chemistry is playing a very important role. I'm going to look, as I told you, for gold and silver cluster, I'm going to give you 1 or 2 slides. So for example, this is a slide. Yeah, I don't know why it's not coming. Sorry, maybe it is very slow. Yeah, this is a slide. For a CO oxidation on pristine gold cluster. So let me first show, this is the pristine AU18 gold cluster. You look at this. So this is a complete reaction mechanism that we can do. And this is the CO and oxygen and the reaction, and then it becomes CO2 and the product. So it's of course an exothermic reaction. We could actually calculate the intermediates and transition state. And there are 2 transition state activation barriers that we got a 0.71 EV and 0.45 EV. Now we look at the same reaction with a doped AU18 gold cage. So basically we have put on that gold cage sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. And you can see how nicely the barriers drop down. So to 0.11, 0.37, and so on. Of course, I am aware that the sodium, putting the sodium is not very easy. It's experimentally, it's very challenging. So we have done magnesium. I think magnesium would be easy to do. Magnesium AU18, it's still very good. Of course, not as good as sodium. Sodium does the best in terms of the barrier. But then again, you never have the best of everything. So it's very hard to experimentally synthesize. But I just want to tell that that's one of the very nice results that we got. And again, it is for the experimentalists who one have to synthesize. So I'm trying to collaborate with some experimentalists who can synthesize this catalyst and actually use it. Another interesting reaction that I talked of, hydrogen atom chemisol. So I looked at small AU6 and AU8, as you can see. If you do carbon monoxide and oxygen activation, CO plus O2 going to CO2 oxidation reaction, you can see the barriers are very high, 0.72 EV with AU6, AU8, 1.193 EV. The binding energy is 0.2 EV, bond length of oxygen is 1.23. So left side is AU6, right side is AU8. The bottom is the same AU6, AU8 with hydrogen chemisol. So the bottom left is AU6H, the right bottom is the AU8H. You can see the dramatic improvement. The barrier goes down from 0.721. So AU6 is very good actually to 0.002. AU8 also goes down with hydrogen chemisorps. You can see the oxygen binding activation, the binding energy also goes up. So it's a very clear result that we have got, that if you can prepare a hydrogen chemisorp, small gold clusters in gas phase, of course, they will be very good. Now, these are difficult to do experiment because you have to have gas phase clusters and then do the CO oxidation. So these are not very easy, and that is a challenge, of course, I must say that. Obviously, they are not going to be experimentally realizable so easily. We are also recently looking at batteries, electrode materials for the lithium-ion batteries. So as with using 2D material, they're widely used for performance enhancement in battery because of high stability and so on. So we have looked at different types of alloys, which are basically chalcogenides, molybdenum sulfide, and WS2, the charge density plots, and the Bayer plots we have actually calculated. We can show that the conductivities are very nicely improved in each of these works. So I just quickly go through, there are 3 slides. We have also looked at the absorption energy in the defective sites of some of these materials. And you can see that the blue phosphorus, blue P I just tell, can provide a theoretical storage capacity, which is very high for both lithium and sodium, which is much higher than the molybdenum sulfide and graphene. So we can actually tune them by doping. That is the whole point. And again, another recent work is again the blue P and the MOH2 lattice mismatch. We can use that. Both belong to the same hexagonal symmetry. Both have the potential to sustain much larger strain. And combining these different 2D materials, we are constructing a heterostructure now. So basically combining these materials, and those heterostructures can have much better properties than individual each of them. So many of these will, I hope, become replacement for the battery material in the next generation. So again, computational chemistry can do from fundamental insights to it interconnect and give very good results for the applications. I don't know how many, I think I will be coming to the close of my talk. Let me now discuss, I didn't want to do a lot of application. I must also say that I'm working on hydrogen storage. I mentioned I did not put much of the slides in hydrogen storage, but one of the things that we are working is a MOF, how to physically dope MOF to improve its hydrogenation, or look at metal hydride and dope so that you reduce the hydrogenation, because you know the problem in MOF and metal hydride are exactly different. In MOF is a physics-of system, so it is capacity to absorb hydrogen is very weak, whereas the chemisop system, it is too strong. Both are not good because hydrogen storage has to be reversible. So we are doing a lot of work on that. But let me first, because I don't have time, let me come to the path forward. So what are the challenges which are left? Have we finished everything? And it might give you an impression that, okay, computational chemistry can do everything. Of course not. We can't still develop accuracy for large systems. So that is a very, very important part. While we are choosing the model systems, and even for the metal cluster, you could see that we are looking at model finite atom metal cluster. The challenge remains for accurate methods for the large systems. So one of the challenges that can be actually, this challenge can be done, is people believe by developing what are called fragment-based methods. So these are called fragmentation. Can we discuss the fragments very accurately and put them together for the large system? Now, this is not very easy because you don't know how to make the fragments. So, but this is essentially a problem that people will have to work on. There are, as I told, multi-scale simulation is a very important tool, and one has to develop appropriate multi-scale simulation for different problems. One of the very fundamental quantum problems that has to be solved is for the strong correlation. Weak correlation is a different kind of problem. That's a problem where you have to do a summation, but eventually, even if you are not able to sum exactly, you still miss a part of the correlation which can be neglected. But in strong correlation, you really don't know how to do, because the approach that you do in weak correlation will simply not work. And if you have an infinitely strong correlation, it simply becomes a full configuration interaction. You take all determinants on the same footing, and then you do diagonalization. And that is impossible to do. So how do you look at strong correlation, both in molecules and solids? So that has remained a challenging problem. The last point that I want to say is, in terms of methodology, is to graft artificial intelligence and machine learning. What can we graft? And there's a lot of discussion on AI and ML are going on. I think in catalysis design is one aspect where a lot of data is there. Can the computer read them and decide which would be a best catalyst? So catalyst design could be one problem, maybe in storage, maybe in somewhere else. But I think we have to say that although artificial intelligence and machine learning are only mathematical tools, and they do not necessarily have the first principle knowledge, they can be used along with the first principle theory to move forward. Material genomics is one such area. So we can actually make a genomics of materials, material data, from where maybe by artificial intelligence and machine learning, we should be able to predict novel materials as a path forward. And that is very important to do that. I think a lot of people are working on material genomics. So we have lots of data, but just too many data, we are still missing novel materials. Can we then start to predict? And if you have very specific predictions, can we then go ahead and do a good calculation? I'm sorry about the slide being a little bit, fonts being a little bit slow, but some of the other challenges are to improve the density functional theory for properties. I think DFT is there, but all of us know the problems of DFT. Getting kinetic energy, because of the fact that we are doing kinetic energy through CONSAM, you bring in the orbitals. Can we have a pure DFT? Can we have a good exchange correlation functional? I think these are the challenges that quantum chemistry has. Then interpretation of prediction of bond structure, optical properties and conductivities, complex systems and soft matter. I talked about it. The multi-scale simulation, strongly correlated system. And I think one of the big challenges will be can we merge, can we learn something by mixing ab initio method and DFT? Because very far too long, the DFT people and ab initio have actually worked separately. Maybe if we merge together, something new will come up. And that's the challenge that one has to look at. In terms of molecular dynamics, non-adiabatic molecular dynamics for large systems is going to become very, very important. Highly correlated quantum chemistry methods, I talked about it already. Identification of molecules for drug design and new functional materials. I already talked about a little bit, especially in renewable energy sector, storage, conversion of CO2, etc. And there, the artificial intelligence and machine learning can be used in a big way. So I think in summary, I should say multi-scale simulation of hard and soft matter, machine learning to handle material genomics, catalysis design, improvement of exchange correlation functional, and actually have a good kinetic energy functional. So basically, you start from fundamental science, come to the computing science, to generation of technology. So many of these are going to be the future challenges that the computational chemistry also have to look at. How can I use computing science to generate technology? Many of you may think, oh, what is this guy talking? You know, is he not a theoretical chemist? Yes, this is going to happen in next generation. Strongly correlated system, I already talked of. Various methods for large system, it has to come. But do not forget, we need to develop highly efficient computer codes for complex systems and non-adiabatic molecular dynamics. Today's codes are efficient, but they need to be made more efficient. And of course, all these will be enabled by development in computer science, where much faster computers will keep coming. And we hope, then the hope that we can actually solve most problems, what Dirac said in 1929, that most of the problems are solved, the dream would actually be realized. But we have still a long way to go. And I think mixing of computational physics, chemistry, biology is very, very important. I think the work in isolation is not the way to do. And that is already happening. So I only call it computational science. So in many ways, my title should have been computational science and not computational chemistry. I think with that, I would acknowledge materials from different sources. And I thank all of you for patiently listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Paul, for one lecture. Would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, if there are questions.
I don't know whether in chat window there are anything. I think if anybody wants to ask him.
Yeah, if anybody has question,
One
unmute and ask. Or...
So one of the part you probably tell a little bit about the computational chemistry regarding the scattering theory and this part, Swinger's development.
Yeah, I did not talk about it because that's not the so that's of course that was already developed long back. But again, for large system, it's a challenge. So many of these methods have to be scaled to large system. So non-adiabatic molecular dynamics, for example, is a big challenge for large system because we are really talking of too small a system to look at protein, for example, in a first principle manner. I think that challenge, I don't know when it will be realized, maybe 20 years, 30 years from now. Spectroscopy, when you do today, is only for some
delay.
We can't do spectroscopy for biological molecules in the first principle manner, unless you do molecular mechanics. Molecular mechanics doesn't give good results. We know that. So those are main challenges that will remain. Yeah.
Discuss something there.
Yeah.
You keep that.
But again, for small molecules, but you can get very accurate.
Yes,
Yeah.
but even for larger molecules, it's quite decent.
Yeah.
But the problem is that once you go a little bit above the potential and minimum, like even for 0.5 electron codes, almost all of these codes which are available these days, because once this normal mode approximation is there,
Right.
vibrational modes.
So, yeah, so that is what I said, that there is a fitting to a normal mode approximation by which you get the spectroscopic data. So obviously that fitting itself is wrong and we don't know how to fit. Exactly. So that's, yeah, I agree, that's a big challenge. First of all, to get to that part of the away from equilibrium is itself a challenge. Quantum chemistry away from equilibrium. One can give a talk on quantum chemistry away from equilibrium. And that itself is a challenge. And that is essentially reflected in getting good quality spectroscopic properties. I agree. That's also very important.
The quantum chemistry away from the equilibrium.
Yeah.
That is basically your product.
Yeah, that's what I said. And that is where the non-adiabatic effects start to
But
come.
that's only, isn't the computational chemistry part is only, it is the specialist job.
I know. So I must say here, unless the specialists do the job, you will not get the code. So I think the specialists have to first work. So many of the things that I showed today, there's a huge amount of work at the back end. In fact, I should say the electron correlation started in almost 1950s. Late 40s with the Lovedean's work, very seminal work of Parallel Lovedean when he got his PhD. And after that, so it's today we are talking of now 70 odd years of electron correlation. People have been discussing, and yet the field is so rich that people don't know many systems that are talking away from equilibrium. We are still puzzled. We are still puzzled to take care of the non-adiabatic effects and electron correlation together, and so on. And generally for large systems, strong correlation. So how to do fragmentation? That is also a big problem. So many things that are happening, but each of these, what has happened already is a result or outcome of specialist working. So I agree that this is a specialist job, but specialist have to do a work before it comes to the coding. I think once you have theory, the coding will come. That's my belief. Theory which is practical.
Oyon has a question.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't read here.
Okay. Sir, I will read it for you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, no, Professor Pal, I mean, so I would just like to have your comments because, you have worked on both molecular quantum chemistry, where we generally work on real space, and periodic systems for periodic solids, where we work on K space. So,
Yeah.
I mean, as we increase the size, we sometimes see that there is a mismatch. So you would like to have a comment on it because it is not, because somebody like you can actually make a comment on this.
So what you are essentially saying that if you would have tried to explain the periodic solid as a limit of the molecular problem, right?
Yes,
There would be a mismatch. You are right. But at this point, I will be very careful in not saying there is a mismatch simply because I do not know how to reach that limit.
yes.
Right? That limit cannot be simply 100,000. The limit of reaching the periodic solid is simply not achievable at this point of time. So the fundamental question that I will put it back to you, is there a mismatch?
Okay.
Okay. When you are saying there's a mismatch, you are only looking at a finite model. Large enough finite model, I agree, to a periodic model. But that large enough finite model is still not a limit to the periodic model. So that would be my comment. Yeah, that would be my comment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
May I ask a question?
I must say I'm very happy, Krishnadi, the lecture. I hope you remember me.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you very often. So I'm very happy.
Thank you.
Yeah, please.
That is a very general question that in medical science, people are using AI, machine learning for that type of work you have mentioned. But what is the status of applying these for this problem for quantum chemistry to find out the particular designing of catalyst and all those things?
So it is not being done. But I just said that is a challenge that artificial intelligence and machine learning should be used for catalyst design. But I think it has not been done with a great purpose. But there is a great possibility that it can be done. A lot of chemists are now learning AI and ML, or they're collaborating with people who know AI and ML. So I hope this is something that's why I said this is a challenge to graft artificial intelligence and machine learning in catalyst design. Because we have a lot of data and certainly there's a lot of scope, I completely agree. But if you ask me how much of work has been done, I will say not much. In fact, almost none. People are beginning to write articles, and I hope this will happen. I think Ayan Datta will also be able to attest my statement that there is a great scope for doing this, but I think there is not much that has happened, which is really to be told. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming, agreeing to give the lecture.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Paul, can I ask you one question? This is GP.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know that you are also there.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for a beautiful presentation. I would like to ask one thing which probably you didn't touch upon because of the lack of time. But anyway, so when you are talking about the electron correlation effects, and as we all know that for the chemists, the coupled cluster is something which is a benchmark. But when it comes to the computational physics community, then they are, trying to use the approach like GW approach or the quantum Monte Carlo approach and things like that in order to include the effect of correlation. Now, I have got a very general question for you. Because of the fact that you have been involved in this for such a long time, that what is your feeling that these two lines of approach, that one is going to the coupled cluster route and the other is via the so-called quantum Monte Carlo route. Now, these two routes, how do you see the sort of, the comparison between these two in the long run?
Yes.
And given the way the computers are becoming faster and faster and faster, and of course the availability of the supercomputers for getting spectroscopic accuracy, okay?
Yes.
Which of these two do you think will sort of compete and how?
Let me first say that both are independently existing there. But what is exciting, and that is already happening today, is that the people are using Monte Carlo. People are using Monte Carlo methods to identify the important determinants in an ab initio method. So you understand what I'm saying? In ab initio method, you have billions and zillions of determinants, right? In a big system. All of them are not important. But a priori, it is very hard, even by an initial estimate of perturbation theory, that's very, very hard task to find out which are important, which are not important. We end up taking a large enough determinants because our basis set is very large, right? The Monte Carlo is being now used to identify which are important determinants. So a pre-selection of those determinants are already done by Monte Carlo, and then you go to the ab initio theory. So in a way, these tools are merging. Instead of asking me which is better, quantum Monte Carlo or coupled cluster, I would say a combination would be even better.
Sure.
But I use Monte Carlo to identify the best determinants and then use that in my coupled cluster wave function. So I'm going to truncate my coupled cluster space only to the space which my Monte Carlo has suggested. So that is what is happening today. People are working already. One of my friends is working, Piotr Pikush, and a few others who are working on such methods. So I would say that yes, it's very much on. And instead of just saying which is better, of course, if you say which is better, it depends. Of course, for the large system, I cannot use coupled cluster. So there is no question of which is better. Quantum Monte Carlo is the one that I should use.
So what is the kind of systems up to which today the coupled cluster can be extended?
Yeah, so coupled cluster can certainly be done to at least the parallel coupled cluster code, etc., to a few hundred atoms.
I see.
That is not a problem. But with the Monte Carlo grafted, 100 atoms is not a problem at all. Maybe people will be able to do 200 atoms in some time. But with Monte Carlo grafted, we can go to much larger systems. Because now Monte Carlo will reduce my space. So when you look at the coupled cluster operator, it will tell you what orbitals to throw out, what determinants to throw out. And that will be a great service. So I think there are people who are working on the combination of Monte Carlo and the ab initio methods. So I will not like to say that they should compete with each other, they should cooperate with each other, and that is my theme. I would say even for periodic solids, ab initio and DFT should come together.
Yeah.
Instead of competing with each other, then only the theory will emerge. And that is one of my basic theme of this talk, that in many ways we should not compete. We should collaborate and improve the subject.
Thank you.
Yeah,
How important is the non-local correlation?
very important, very important. In all atoms and molecules, you have to local.
Do you see quantum computers?
No, non-local depends on what system you are. You don't need quantum computers or something, but even without that, people are using non-local DFT. Like hybrid functionals, people are using like B3-LEAP. B3-LEAP has non-local, right? Even GGA and all that are non-local to an extent, but proper non-local today are hybrid functionals. So B3-LEAP, B-LEAP, they're all non-local. So there are so many non-local functionals which are there. Within that also there is a competition, which is a better non-local functional. And then there are functionals which are Minnesota kind of functionals, where more of Hartree-Fock exchange is added. So basically hybrid functionals are ones where you use a percentage of Hartree-Fock exchange, which is completely non-local. Let's say 20% in B3-LEAP. I don't know, I've forgotten, maybe 20%. But you can use more. You can tune it. And that's what the Minnesota functionals are doing. You can even use exact Hartree-Fock exchange, which is completely non-local, and then tune the correlation functional. So yeah, lots of functionals, just as I'm talking, new functionals are coming up. Okay, so non-local functionals are already there, and they are routinely used in molecular calculation. In fact, in quantum chemists very rarely use LDA. LDA is used mostly in physics, in material physics, but LDA is not good in quantum mechanics. You have to use non-local functions. Okay, because LDA is too basic, to be honest. Thank you.
Well, all good things have to come to an end. So it's my great pleasure to present you a okay.
Thank you, and thanks to Krishnadi also.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, there's a photograph, so I should put my.
No, open to layer.
Thank you. Oh, what is this?
কত টাকা পেলেন?
I don't want to reveal it, but. Ache? Must be having it. Thank you for inviting me again. Shantanu, thank you for inviting me. And particularly Professor Aidastidhar is so well known to me that it's a great pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this illuminating lecture.
I'm told that you are in Bangalore today.
Yeah.
Thank you for connecting from there. My pleasure.
I have to,
Thank
because
you.
I didn't want to miss your lecture.
Thank you very much. And thank you all the attendees.
Mhm.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.